Hello and welcome, my name is James Simon, and I am excited to show you what we have today. Okay, so what I've developed is a drag and sculpt based on the concept art by my coworker here at Trinity Animation. You can find a link to the original work and others by her down in the description below. This was a really fun dragon to make. I was feeling a little sluggish at first. That could happen if you use a bunch of different softwares for an extended period of time. You start to mix up different control schemes. But after about 30 minutes or so, I started to get my speed back. Now, at this point, you've likely seen the finished result on the thumbnail. It's important to know when you're just starting out that you aren't going to have something really presentable till a few hours into your work. It definitely helps moving forward knowing before I get started that my model isn't going to look good until a good amount of work has been put into it. I will even go as far as to say to myself, this looks terrible, just awful. I mean, this looks really bad. Excellent, I'm on track. I would say especially if you're having anxiety over your work, spend some time at the beginning of your project playing with your art, having fun, being okay that this isn't going to be a perfectly sculpted model or whatever you're doing. It's not going to get there until you put some time and effort into it. Okay, so what I've done at this point is block in the basic details. And I did that primarily with the tools introduced in tutorial 1. Your move tool, clay buildup, and of course the damn standard brush. These are the ZBrush sculptor's primary tools. You figure out the shape with the move tool, you define your edges with the damn standard, and you block in details with the clay buildup. At this point I'm setting up the eyes. I've inserted a sphere mesh, mirrored and welded it, and now I am positioning them with the move gizmo. I like to have these on another layer so that I'm not interacting with them while sculpting. I will adjust these a few times throughout the sculpt, but for the most part I am just going to leave them alone and sculpt around them. The next step is setting up the neck and chest area. I like to do this with the snake tool and the Sculptress. That's the little yin-yang button down below. Enabling Sculptress will allow us to add on infinitely generating topology as we brush or inflate. It's not very clean topology and not very useful for sculpting onto. That's why I will then dynamesh it at a higher resolution, unifying the topology. Keeping in mind that I don't really want to mess with the eyes too much, I am pulling the body down rather than moving the head up. As for the nose and face details, it's time to start working with that damn standard brush to plot some landmarks for me to work from. I'm just exaggerating some of the details at this point to create nice little planes for me to work with. Clay buildup is really more of a medium scale brush. I will use it on parts like the cheek or the eyebrows, anywhere where I want to lift up and outward in sort of a rectangular shape. Now here you will see the sculpt get really sharp and clean. That is me clicking what I call the Make Look Good button. What it actually is the clay polish tool. It's a very powerful tool in the stylization workflow. The only settings that I really tweak with this are the repeat soft and repeat sharpness, which I always have in a ratio of like 5 for softness and maybe like 10 to 15 for sharpness. I always want my sharpness a little bit more powerful than the softness for those nice crisp lines. As for the teeth, I've inserted using a custom insert brush a cone that I have repeated multiple times. I then shaped everything a little using the move tool. I'm always adjusting things and trying to get the sculpt a little closer to the concept, from the big details down to the small details. I'll then adjust a couple of fine details here and there to get the look of the teeth. I'm using a combination of the Move Topology brush and the Inflate Tool. The Inflate Tool is pretty self-explanatory. It inflates the geometry wherever you use the brush. The Move Topology tool is a little bit different. It acts like the Move tool, but it affects only one set of topology at a time. So with that, the rest of this is really just moving everything into position and getting things closer to that concept work. You can see that I'm adjusting the eyes now and kind of going through the history timeline to see where I've been and where I'm kind of going with this. Adding in some extra details with that damn standard, going back in. Now here I'm actually using a trim dynamic brush to kind of just affect that edge and smooth things down. Trim dynamic is a brush which is very similar to another brush called H polish, which I use probably a little bit more frequently, but trim dynamic will affect primarily hard edges. You can see here I'm playing around with my clay polish settings, trying to get something nice and sharp. Also dynameshing as I go, and that's going to kind of fuse things back together, and I'm having to rework the nostrils, and that could be the case where you have to redo things quite a bit in this whole process. Adjusting the mouth, making sure that expression is reading the same that it is in the concept art. I gave it sort of like a happy smile at first, because like I said before, you want to play with your art with the first couple of hours that you're working on things, have a little bit of fun with it, but then start to refine those details and get things closer towards whatever end goal you have in sight for your art project. So here I'm using the spiral brush to get the angle closer towards what it looks like on the concept art. putting a bit of detail into those eyes, but at this point, dynameshing and clay polishing is going to destroy a lot of that going forward. So I don't want to go too heavily into it. I just want to have the basic look that I'm going for to help navigate my design choices as I work on this sculpt. Playing around with the eyes a little bit more towards the cheekbones, trying to get sort of a wrinkly look towards them. It's got sort of a snake appearance, which is usually a good sign when you're working on a dragon, because they have sort of like a mix between a snake and sort of a lion in terms of their general features. Here I'm getting ready to adjust those gums. I'm getting the lower lip in order, digging it in a little bit more with that damn standard brush. And for the gums, what I've decided to do is bring in another mesh and adjust it on a different subtool level. Kind of like the way we're adjusting the main mesh on a different subtool level than the eyes and the teeth, and vice versa. Remembering to dig in between those teeth and bring it out a little bit where the teeth are going to protrude, putting a little bit of a hard edge along the gum line, and that'll kind of help it stick out a bit more. Now it's going to look a little bit wonky at first. I don't have the full mouth bag in there just yet. I just want to have an idea of where the gum line is as I continue to work on the expression and other details here. And so here's a cool little trick you can do for making lips. What I've done is I've inserted a cylinder, and now I'm extending it pretty far out. I'm going to dynamesh it so that all of the mesh is unified and I have a lot of topology to work with. And what I'll then do is I'll move into what's called the bend curve tool. And the bend curve is a really nifty tool. I usually like to start with like 3 points in the resolution. And that furthest most orange cone is going to be what you use to change the resolution. Just get things into position at first, and then start adding in extra points and adjusting things as you go. This is a very effective tool for lips, hair, anything that you want to control along the line. I almost liken it to like the pen tool in Photoshop or Illustrator. And then once I get the general shape of it down, I use my move tool to refine things further, get things into place. And then it's as simple as mirror and welding to get your lip to go on the other side. This is one of those tools that you want to use asymmetrically and then mirror and weld it together. It's not going to work for you in subdivision either, so just do this first and then Z-remesh it or remesh it however you want to afterwards. Alrighty, so that's about it for part 1. We covered a lot of different topics, from using new brushes, using clay polish, dynamesh, to some of the deeper functionality of the 3D gizmo, like using the bend curve tool for the lips. I hope you come back for part 2. There's a whole lot of cool stuff to come, like using the Z-poser to manipulate all the different subtools without having to merge it all together and break those individual subtools. We'll develop those tertiary details a bit more and do some painting and talk about Z-remesher for a bit. If you're interested in the software or want to learn more, click the link in the description below. I'm James Simon with Trinity Animation. Happy sculpting!